When things are divided with a normal distribution, it ends up looking like this curve. Sometimes it's a little taller or a little shorter, a little stretched out, depending on how your data falls. But generally, let me just point out some things. All right, so my mean is right here in the middle. This is your mean. It's actually your median and your mode. So your mean is there. As you can see, these numbers are jumping up by 4 each time. So that means our standard deviation is 4, okay? Equals 4. So that's the worst looking for ever. Our standard deviation equals 4. So that's why it's jumping up plus 4 each time along the x-axis, and it's also going down by 4 each time. So we could say that this data, it's got a mean of 20, and our standard deviation is 4. And when that happens, things get divided up in this way. So this is this first inflection point, and they drew that line there for us nicely. We're going to find that 34% of our data is in between this 20 and 24. Okay, so 34% of our data is in this section of the curve under here. That's 34% of our data. And along with that, you might want to, in your packet, somewhere copy down all of the information on this chart. Okay, copy down all the information on this chart. Not necessarily these numbers at the bottom. You don't need to copy those down, but copy down the rest of the numbers on this chart. So you've got those percentages. You want to have those percentages here. You want those percentages, and you want these numbers. Now these numbers in here, this is written as a decimal. The percent would be 34%. So you have to pay attention to what it's asking for. If it asks for percent, that's 34%. As percent, this is 13. Okay, it doesn't like when I do points. 13.5%. And this one is also 13.5%. So if you have to put the number to the calculator, you're going to use the decimal. If it asks for percents, you're going to use percent. And this is 2.35%. And this is 2.35%. So if it asks how much of your data falls in between 12 and 20, you're going to add up your 34% plus your 13.5%. Okay, it's kind of how these curves work. But again, I would start at the beginning of the video and copy down that curve with the percents so that you have that in your packet for your test. We're not really going to talk about, a lot of times we'll call these tails. We're not going to talk about these tails out here. We got a tail out here and a tail out here. And basically these kind of go forever and never actually touch your x-axis. So we don't spend a lot of time with those numbers at this level. But we're just going to call the number out there, we're just going to call it less than 1% on each side, on each tail, less than 1%. It's actually 0.15%, and so in a calculator, you'd enter it like that. We're not really going to worry about it, so just call it less than 1%. It's a really small number out here on these tails, out in this direction, okay? So we're not really going to worry about those, but I wanted to make sure you knew what those were. And let's say if it tells us the mean is 50 and the standard deviation is 5, it'll ask us to label the things, and then it'll ask us some questions. So if our mean is 50, we know our mean goes right there. That's a 50. Okay, so that's a 50. Our mean is here, and our standard deviation is 5, so it's going to go up by 5 each time. It's going up by 5, and it's also going to go down by 5 from your mean. So 50 minus 5 is going to give us 45. 45 minus 5 is going to give us 40. 35. All right. Then it might ask us a question. It might say, what numbers or how much data were in between, let's say it says in between 45 and 60. Okay, so it's asking for all of the data in here. So I'm going to need to add this number and this number and this number. If it asks for percent, remember that I'm going to be adding 34%. and 34% and 13.5%. Okay. So if I'd ask for those, I'd add all of those together, and that's what you would get. So just make sure you're paying attention to which sections it asks you to add up. And if you have any other questions, please feel free to ask your teacher, and don't forget to be awesome.